So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Okay, I'm Tricia Clark. I'm a mealtime mentor and kitchen witch, and my focus is really helping busy professional women and moms transform mealtime from stress and angst to really joy and connection and ease. And we do that through human design, practical meal planning solutions, and different fun ways to connect with your family. So it's really less about the food and really more about how do we show up differently and connect with our people.
Sounds amazing. How did you get into helping moms plan and prepare meals?
So I, when I got married and had kids, I was ill-equipped. I didn't know how to feed them, and I had to teach myself. And really, through the process, I just really just I shouldn't say discovered. Everybody else has known it probably. I didn't know it, but didn't realize the power of how sharing food and cooking for people, and how really those meals brought people together. And when I noticed that happening for me, and it was happening with my friends, but not necessarily my family, I realized I had some changes to make. And then throughout that, I sold Pampered Chef, and I noticed that we were getting all these resources to help us with mealtime, like HelloFresh boxes and meal plans and all these great resources, Pinterest, right? Food blogs. But they were all being advertised as the solution, but nobody was talking about how to pull it all together. And I would meet these women over and over at different Pampered Chef parties and events, and nothing had changed. They had the recipes. I'd shown them how to make it. They had the tools, and but nobody was showing them how to pull it all together. And I was like, that's a gap in the market, and that's a gap that I can fill because I love puzzles. I love problem solving. I love to connect people, and I love to cook food. And I thought, okay, I've figured out how to do this for my family, and it's a sweet spot, and I see a gap in the market. So let's see what we can do with it. That's how it started.
Yeah, that's that's quite a story you have there. Kind of how I got into networking. Like I didn't know how to do it, so I kind of had to learn the hard way.
Yep.
That's the short form. Um,
Yeah, I feel like so many of our journeys come, I mean, so many of our businesses come from our own personal journey, right? And figuring it out and then, trying to see how we can help other people do the same thing and faster than what it took us.
so what's your current strategy for networking and getting in front of potential clients?
So for networking, I'm an extrovert, so I love networking. And so I work a full-time job still. So I really find I like to have multiple groups and opportunities that I can network throughout the week. And then so that I have different opportunities to pop in when I'm available. So whether it's a full all day networking event like a We Meet Wednesdays or another group where they do one networking event like that's an hour each week, I have a few of those in my pocket. And so I really enjoy conversation and really, again, making connections, whether that's for my business or not, but connecting with people and having those conversations. I thrive on that exchange of energy. And so that's really where my networking strategy has been, is finding the groups and the people that I really resonate with, and then making sure that I can be in those rooms as often as possible.
So, how have you changed the way that you network over time since you started your journey?
Oh man. So when I first started my business, it was, all of the get into 5 Facebook groups a day and, reach out to 10 people. And like that was a version of networking and like following other people's people, right? And starting conversations. And that just never felt comfortable for me. I like to have something to respond to, not necessarily to like immediately reach out. And so I'd say it's really changed, one, in really finding the groups that have people that I really would connect with anyway. And then really just, I've tried so many different things from speed networking to, being in a room with several people. I found that I like small groups. I like small groups of people where we can have deep conversations and really build that referral network more so than like hopping on a call and being like, this is my business. Are you interested? For me, it's really come down to getting to know people personally. And if they end up being referrals or friends, awesome.
Yeah, I've definitely changed my networking strategy over time as well, and I'm sure most people have.
Well, there's so many different kinds, right? That can work. I mean, everybody works a little bit differently. So I feel like you kind of have, there's a bit of a trial and error process in figuring it out too, right? Like you would think that speed networking would be my jam as much as I talk and as social as I am. But for me, it's not.
Yeah, I found the key to those events is to make sure you follow up.
Yeah,
'Cause otherwise, it's
true.
totally pointless.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably been the hardest thing for me, not to learn that I need to, but to create a system that really works for me on that follow up because the fortune really is in the follow up. I mean, and it's not just following up once, right? We're all busy and need to be reminded sometimes. And it's so easy to like quit on the first try and be like, oh, well, I didn't hear back.
Yeah, people get busy with stuff, especially your target demographic.
And I can't tell you how many times somebody sends me a message and in my head I responded or I started a response and didn't hit send. And so I appreciate the repeated follow up because I probably did forget to answer you. I promise you I will never intentionally ignore you if you message me.
How have you found networking to be while having a 9 to 5? How do you fit it in?
So I've tried a few different things but I still, I'd say Wednesdays are my day where I have the fewest meetings. And so I always try to set aside like Wednesday is sort of like my networking day. And so that's the day that I leave open for coffee chats. That's the day that I try to attend different networking events. That has worked well for me. And it's just finding those days when I have the most time available. And sometimes it's finding events that are in the evening because I can't get to it during the day. And so it really goes back to having that list of different times and options so that I can slide in wherever it works.
Yeah, do what works for you. So I know you mentioned that you're more extroverted. How does that affect the way that you network?
I think in that I'm not nervous to show up in a group and have a conversation, right? Like I literally, like the joke has been my whole life that I could talk to a stump. And so I love to I love to go in a room where and meet new people, right? Like that's not intimidating to me, but I know it can be. I know it can be for a lot of people. And so I think in some ways it makes it easier for me. The flip side of that, where it makes it harder, is I can forget the purpose of why I'm there and just get into the chit chat. And I've made a new friend, which is great, but I might have forgotten the focus of why I attended the event to begin with. And then later I'm like, oh, I really didn't write down those people that I wanted to follow up with, but I had a great time.
Yeah, I always remember to save the chat and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get to it. Like maybe not right away. Maybe I have another call booked or something, but like within a week.
I do still need a better system for follow up because I'll save the chat and I might not ever open it again. And that's one of the things that I'm still trying to get good at. How about you?
Yeah. I save it and I always check it. Like I didn't used to, but now I do.
You found a rhythm that works for you?
Yes,
Yeah,
I have.
good.
Do you prefer networking groups or having more one-on-one type of conversations?
Mm, I like them both. I like them both. I like meeting. One, I like the energy of having multiple people in the room and hearing different perspectives. But then I really do like to shift that off into a one-on-one conversation with the people that I find that I really connect with. I don't know that I prefer one over the other.
Yeah, they're kind of both part of networking, but at different stages.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also depends on how we got connected. So I just came back from a meeting. Another lady I had met online. She messaged me a few weeks ago and said, hey, I have a friend who is moving to Arkansas, and I think she might be somewhere near you. And I thought I would connect you guys. And I was like, okay, sounds great. And so I get in touch with her. She literally lives 4 miles from me. And so, it's funny how that networking spider web works, right? So the lady I knew from online lives in Hawaii, and her friend was from Hawaii, just moved to Arkansas, right? And so we all met from one-on-one connections, but those referrals that I talked about. And so today we met for coffee because I've rescheduled it twice. And so I was like, okay, we've got to make this happen today. She's new to the area. And so we had a really nice chat. But it was one of those great one-on-ones that I wouldn't have made if I was just focused on those group settings, those networking events. But it was a networking event that led me to Janice, that led me to Marianne. If that makes sense.
Yeah, just kind of chaining them up and like meeting like the friend of the friend. And
Yeah, and now I've been invited to, share my business and my perspective about what I do in yet another group, right? And we didn't meet up at all for the purpose of business. I just wanted to meet up with her because she was new to the area and, make a new friend. And now I've got another avenue to market.
that's amazing. Would you say getting comfortable being uncomfortable is part of the entrepreneur skill set?
2000%. 2000%. I feel like so much of entrepreneurship is doing it messy and doing it scared. And I am a lifelong people pleaser, perfectionist. And there were so many things about entrepreneurship that I was unprepared for in terms of how showing up and how much more it meant to me to show up for something that I created myself and a different level of vulnerability. And then I would think, okay, I've conquered it. Like I'm showing up, I'm doing video, I'm showing up in all these places, like I got this. And then something happens, and like all of a sudden, all those fears and that uncomfortableness is back as you decide to change something or level up. Like I just feel like it is a huge part of entrepreneurship. And I don't know that it ever goes away. I just think it kind of comes in cycles as you're growing.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. As soon as I good at something, I'm like, I need to expand, I need to improve.
Yeah, I mean, there are networking groups I've gone into, and I was nervous that first time because I didn't know the people yet and I didn't know the structure. And so that first event, I would go in and I would just kind of sit and listen and watch and maybe participate like in the comments or chat. And then the next time come back and be like, okay, now I have a feel for the group. I feel like I can really jump in. And it wasn't so much about being shy, so much as I don't understand, I'm not sure where I fit in here yet. And so I see those pieces of uncomfortable too, as you're figuring out your people in your groups. And are you in the right networking places? I think is one of them.
Yeah. So yeah, I've definitely tried out different groups and they didn't all work out. Some of them worked out, some of them didn't.
Do you find that you do or enjoy more structured networking events more so than like less structured? Do you know what I mean?
I've done both types and I don't know if I really have a preference.
Okay.
Um, did you invest in upgrading your networking skill set?
I have not. Now, because I've grown up on the corporate side of things, like I've had to go through different trainings, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with Dale Carnegie training, which is training on public speaking and making connections and making friends. And I've been through Toastmasters. And so um, I haven't invested in the networking skills. I have invested in different groups or networking groups or networking events in order to see where I feel like either my ideal client is or where I best fit in terms of the people I connect with. So I've invested in networking, but not necessarily to improve my networking skills.
So networking groups, but not necessarily specifically to improve your networking skills.
Correct.
Um, did you make some online connections that you invested more time than you should have invested in them? And what did you learn from that?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've definitely invested time I would say time and money in whether it's coaches, collaborations, all of those things create new networks, right? Different programs. And
Yeah.
so I've definitely invested in some that were unaligned for me. And I think that the biggest lesson I learned was to really trust my intuition and trust that I know what I need when I invested in things that I thought, well, I don't have it in me already. I need this thing in order to get better. And then I would be taught things that I've already learned. And it was really more about trusting myself to do it than needing more skills. And I've learned that lesson over and over and over in the last 3 years since I started this thing.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that as a thing. Like, you need some strategy, but then there's the overdoing it and just,
Yeah. So much of it is about just showing up and doing it, even if you feel like you don't know what you're doing. And I think we go back to that uncomfortable. That's the scariest part of all, right? Like you do know, it's just scary because you haven't done it and it's putting yourself out there in a different way.
yeah. And so I want to ask you about what are your thoughts on tapping into your intuition when networking?
Mm. So I'm a big fan of human design. And so I actually started my human design journey. My first coach was a human design coach. And that's kind of how I started on this whole, not how I got into my business, but I started my business with a human design coach. And it's been fascinating to learn where I've been conditioned in my life in terms of how to make decisions versus how I am designed to make decisions, right? And so I'll try to keep this short, but you're told to like be logical, weigh the pros and cons, and we're taught to make all the decisions with our brains, right? And not really listen to our bodies. And so with my journey with human design has really been about unlearning a lot of that and learning that I know exactly what it feels like in my body if something is a hell yes or a hell no. And if there's no reaction, it's still a no. And so I think trusting your intuition when you make those connections is incredibly important because you're, I really believe that if you pay attention, for me, that comes out as, in human design world, I'm a sacral authority and I'm a manifesting generator. So things come out very guttural for me. They're almost like a sound or a lean in or a lean out. If you pay attention, you will know if my body's making that decision for me. Because if I'm all excited and it's for me, I'm leaning in or I'm leaning out. Or my husband gets so mad because he'll say something and I'll be like, And he goes, don't me. You haven't even heard me out. I'm like, I already know. Like I'm meant to make decisions that quickly, not weigh them out and belabor them and overthink them. And when I do overthink them and think and weigh all the pros and cons, those are the decisions that I regret the most every single time.
Yeah, I've definitely made some unaligned decisions just like being in my head and
Mhm.
writing out the pros and cons. And then I realized, oh, I need to lean into that
Or the
intuition.
shoulds and the coulds, right? Like
Yeah.
they said, I should do this. This should be the kind of person that I connect with. That doesn't mean anything if you don't feel connected to them. That's the stuff that we really have to let go of.
Yeah. But it's important to note intuition is separate from feelings because you could have an intuitive hit to do something that's uncomfortable.
Correct. I mean, some of the most intuitive hits I get make zero logical sense whatsoever, right? And they're quite often the best decisions. And it's not based on emotion. It really is based on like, yes, this is the thing. It's not always like this makes me feel good, right? They're different, but it does take some practice to figure out what that is and what does listening to your intuition look like.
Yeah, it's something that, and I'm a pro at this. It's even something that I could get better at for sure. So, any closing remarks or things you want to add?
Hmm. I mean, one of my favorite words, whether we're talking about clients I'm working with in the kitchen or we're talking about networking, is just experiment. play with it, do it, show up, do 3 rounds of speed networking. And if you just literally don't like, if you just literally, not just that it's uncomfortable, but if you just literally just hate it and you're like, this is awful, don't do it. Experiment and play, and then really figure out how to tap into your intuition. I mean, I think those are the big things for me when it comes to networking. And then I don't have any advice on the whole follow-up system. Find somebody who's really good at it and borrow their system. And again, experiment and see if it works for you. I got the ADHD brain, so I can't do a lot of structure. Like I don't do well with like that hardcore consistent structure. It's got to be very simple for me. I
Thank
think
you
that's
for
it.
your thank you for your time and giving us your insights into all of these things. Um, I don't know if there was any other things you wanted to add or
Yeah, just if you want to learn more about what I do, you can find me on Facebook. It's Tricia the Kitchen Witch. That's my handle across all the social platforms. And if you're struggling with mealtime, I have this great little quiz that helps me uncover your mealtime superpower and give you some strategies completely free, but it's fun and I would love to connect with you. So come find me.
thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for having me. It was fun to, it's network is one of those things I don't get to discuss. I do a lot of it, but it's not something anybody really like talks about the ins and outs of doing. So I love what you're bringing to the table with that.